1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking.
You see concern etched on their faces, the breath that they've been holding released, and then the realization sets in that something is wrong.
Space exploration pushes the boundaries of human exploration and technology, but unfortunately, not all these missions end in success. From deadly experimental space plane crashes to ill-fated missions that the government tried to cover up, these are the top 10 secret space missions that ended in tragedy. Has there ever been a real, officially documented flying saucer? Well, yes, actually, it's called the Avrocar. The Avrocar was part of a secretive project in the 50s that aimed to create a flying saucer for the US military. The Avrocar was designed by the Canadian company Avro Aircraft and intended to be a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. The idea was to give the military a high-speed aircraft that could hover and fly low to the ground, ideal for reconnaissance and troop transport. But things didn't work out. The prototype couldn't achieve the speeds or capabilities they were hoping for. I mean, just look at it. Instead of flying like a bird, it barely managed to stay off the ground, and when it did, it was just all wobbly. Its performance was underwhelming, to say the least. In 1961, after spending millions, the project was officially scrapped. And yes, I find that pretty tragic, because how cool would it be to have an actual flying saucer flying around in the sky? Ones that don't want to abduct us and stick probes in our bodies. Here's one of the strangest stories in early space exploration, the tale of Ivan Istochnikov and his trusty dog, Cloka. Soyuz 2 was an uncrewed mission. It was the craft that the manned Soyuz 3 mission was going to be docking with. Well, there may be more to the story. In 1993, an American journalist named Mike Arena uncovered some top secret information. He claimed that a cosmonaut by the name of Ivan Istochnikov and his dog had actually been aboard Soyuz 2 during its mission in October of 1968. According to Arena, they disappeared after being struck by a meteorite. He went on to say that the Soviet government erased all records of Istochnikov and Cloka because they couldn't handle the embarrassment of a failed mission at a time where they were in such heavy competition with the United States. Well, this entire story was later revealed to be a hoax crafted by an artist named Joan Fontcaberta as an elaborate modern art project, complete with fake mission artifacts and digitally manipulated photos. The work was so convincing that it fooled not just the public, but even some media outlets. In 1998, Mexico's Luna Cornea magazine published a whole issue featuring the truth about Istochnikov, totally oblivious to the fact that they were promoting a piece of art, not history. But, hey, I mean, is this just what the Russian government wants you to think? The Boeing X-20 Dyna-Soar was an ambitious project by the United States Air Force, aiming to create a cutting-edge spaceplane capable of performing a range of military missions, everything from aerial reconnaissance to sabotaging enemy satellites. It kicked off on October 24th, 1957 with high hopes and a budget of $660 million. That's about $6.5 billion today. The project fell flat on its face. Not quite tragic by the sounds of it, but ask the ones who dumped all the money into it and they'd give you a very different answer. So what went wrong? Well, first off, there's the name. Now, I kind of like the name, but it's definitely silly. You see, it's Dyna, spelled D-Y-N-A, and Soar, S-O-A-R. Dyna-Soar. There's also a significant lack of direction with this project. The Air Force struggled to define clear goals for the program. Was it a weapon? A reconnaissance tool? The confusion meant that every step forward seemed to lead to another roadblock. On top of that, they faced constant issues with funding. Research programs like this often face budget cuts, and Dyna-Soar was no exception. But the biggest problem, the launch vehicle. They couldn't settle on the right booster to get Dyna-Soar into orbit. Originally, they floated several options, but every time they made a decision, the chosen booster fell short. By the time they finally settled on the Titan 3C, the project was already running into delays. In January of 1963, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara questioned whether Dyna-Soar was even worth pursuing, noting that the Air Force was too focused on controlled re-entry without any clear purpose for orbital missions. The program was officially canceled on December 10th of 1963. In December of 1959, a major bombshell dropped when a high-ranking Czechoslovakian communist allegedly leaked super-sensitive information about secret Soviet space missions. According to this source, a cosmonaut named Alexei Ladovsky had been launched aboard a modified R-5A rocket. He also mentioned that Ladovsky and several others, Andrei Mitikov, Sergei Shiborin, and Maria Gromova, had tragically perished during these covert flights. The claims were then picked up by an Italian news agency, but then that was it. There's never been any concrete evidence of these secret missions or the cosmonauts who died. So was this an entirely fabricated story, or were there really dark secrets being hidden by the Soviet space program? Colonel Pyotr Dolgov, Ivan Kacher, and Alexei Grachov were part of a risky program testing high-altitude parachuting, which was crucial for spaceflight preparation. On November 1st, 1962, Dolgov attempted a jump from a Volga balloon gondola at an altitude of 28,640 meters, about 93,960 feet. Unfortunately, as he exited the gondola, the visor of his spacesuit collided with the structure, causing a depressurization but led to his death almost instantly. Kacher's fate is still unknown, as he disappeared around the same time, and his name has since been connected to the equipment used in these tests. Grachov was also involved in the high-altitude testing alongside Dolgov and Kacher. In late 1959, a Russian magazine featured a man named Gennady Zavodsky, another test subject who later appeared on lists of deceased cosmonauts, but with no details about his death. Vladimir Ilyushin was born on March 31st, 1927, into an aviation family. Ilyushin grew up to be a test pilot, which really has to be one of the bravest career paths out there, right? No one ever mentions that, a test pilot. Freaky. In early April of 1961, just days before Yuri Gagarin's historic spaceflight, the Soviet Union announced that Ilyushin had been involved in a serious car accident. But rumors started to spread that there was more to this story, that he'd actually died in a failed orbital flight. Reports from various sources, including the Western communist newspaper Daily Worker, claimed that Ilyushin had indeed attempted a mission that went horribly wrong. French broadcaster Edouard Bardovsky stated that Ilyushin had launched in March and slipped into a coma after the flight, but NORAD tracking stations reported that there was just no evidence of any launch. But things kept getting fishier. Later that year, US News even suggested that Gagarin's flight was a ruse and that he was actually a stand-in for the ailing Ilyushin. This conspiracy is so big that it even spawned a couple of movies. The 1999 film, The Cosmonaut Cover-Up, claimed that Ilyushin had indeed been the first man in space, stating that he was launched in a capsule named Rossiya. In the movie, after experiencing a guidance malfunction, Ilyushin was forced into an unguided crash landing in China. So I've talked about a few Cold War Russian space program cover-up conspiracies, but is there any physical proof of shady stuff going on? Well, there are possible audio recordings. The Giudica Gordelia brothers were two Italian amateur radio operators who became famous in the 60s for releasing what they said were recorded secret communications from Soviet space missions. Starting in May of 1960, the brothers claimed to have intercepted signals from a series of Soviet missions that ended tragically. One of the creepiest is the supposed recording of a cosmonaut suffocating in space. Just before Yuri Gagarin's historic flight in April of 1961, the brothers claimed they tracked a capsule that orbited Earth 3 times before crashing back down. The recordings continued with distress signals from an orbiting capsule in May of 1961, and they reported a Soviet spacecraft that veered off course and disappeared in October of 1961. In November of 1962, they noted a capsule that had bounced off the atmosphere during re-entry and vanished. The brothers also alleged that a female cosmonaut died during re-entry in May of 1963, followed by another loss in April of 1964 when a capsule burned up on re-entry. Now, as for the validity of these recordings, they're highly controversial, but a lot of them are pretty haunting either way. On October 31st of 2014, Michael Alsbury, an American test pilot, tragically lost his life during a test flight of the VSS Enterprise, a suborbital space plane. They were trying out a new hybrid rocket engine that used nylon fuel instead of rubber. The Enterprise was released from its carrier plane, VMS Eve, and just 11 seconds after firing the rocket, the spacecraft broke apart in a massive explosion, scattering debris across a 35-mile stretch of the Mojave Desert. Witnesses saw a parachute, but sadly Alsbury didn't survive. His co-pilot Peter Seibold managed to escape, but he was seriously injured and was rushed to the hospital. His escape was remarkable though. He managed to unbuckle his seat and parachute to safety just in time as the wreckage fell around him. At first, people thought the new rocket engine might be to blame, but investigators quickly ruled that out when they found the engine and propellant tanks were still intact. What really went wrong was the feathering system, which helps slow the spacecraft down. It deployed too early while the rocket was still firing, leading to this catastrophic breakup. Deviating from the depressing side of things for a moment, let's talk about something called Solar Warden. Solar Warden is said to be a secret space fleet that patrols space, protecting Earth from all sorts of intergalactic threats. So while Solar Warden itself may not be a tragic accident, there's no doubt that if a military force battling aliens in space really does exist, which I hope it does, they've definitely had some casualties. Now, supposedly the United States operates a fleet consisting of 8 massive motherships, each about the size of an aircraft carrier, along with 43 smaller scout ships. These crafts are rumored to be advanced enough to travel throughout the entire solar system, not just orbiting Earth. Solar Warden allegedly came into existence thanks to advanced alien technology, which the US government acquired through secret deals with extraterrestrials. Info on Solar Warden came from a Scottish hacker named Gary McKinnon. Between February of 2001 and March of 2002, he hacked into nearly 100 military and NASA computers, claiming that he stumbled on all these images of UFOs and said that there was this Solar Warden program. This incident is often dubbed the biggest military computer hack of all time. Michael J. Adams was a brave astronaut known for flying the experimental X-15 rocket plane. A total of 12 pilots had flown this plane, including Neil Armstrong. But Adams' last flight took place on November 15th of 1967. He reached a jaw-dropping altitude of 266,000 feet. He'd broken a new record, but things took a turn for the worst on his descent. The nose of the X-15 veered off course by 15 degrees, sending the aircraft into a dangerous spin. And just 10 minutes after launching, Adams reported that he was in a spin. Tragically, the X-15 broke apart shortly after, killing him. Well, with all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.